This is a bit more sort of meat and drink for the IEA. So this is Mrs. Sunak, an extremely rich woman who had non-dom status, thereby able to avoid a colossal income tax bill had she had British status. Sir Keir Starmer says it was unfair of Conservatives to reduce their family tax burdens while putting up tax for others. The tax burden's gone up under Rishi Sunak. He's trimmed it a little in his last spring statement, but he's still presided over a tax hike. John, what do you make of this? If you're Chancellor of the Exchequer or a government minister, are you under some obligation to maximise your tax liability?
In a strict sense, no. There's two questions here, though. I think the first is whether we expect literally a different legal standard for members of the government or MPs. Personally, I don't think so. The second, probably more pertinent question is it politically wise for you to be doing this if you are the man who sets tax rates? And his appeal to kind of, oh, this is actually about my wife, it doesn't really stack up when your family is part of a kind of billionaire, massive dynasty. So, yeah, my answer would be that politically probably not a particularly sensible thing to do, an absolute gift for Labour as well, when their slogan for the best part of the last year has been one rule for them, one rule for everyone else, to have this, the perception at least that he's a kind of part of a globe-trotting elite who play by a different set of rules to the average person. The fact that it came so soon after the national insurance hike also just made it even more of a gift for them. So, no, I don't think we should necessarily ban ministers from certain types of tax arrangements. I mean, the tax system, as you know, Mark, is absolutely littered with exemptions and reliefs,
carve-outs, the whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, are we going to, be up in arms the next time we see a minister in duty-free?
Well, that's what I wanted to think. That's exactly the kind of principle I wanted to come on to. Look, it's kind of part of my day job to actively court unpopularity, right? So the best way I can do that at the moment is to leap to the defence of Rishi Sunak and his missus. Tom, what do you make of this? Because, OK, I mean, there's a large amount of money at stake because the Chancellor's wife is from such an affluent family. But as John says, should politicians have to declare how much they're, I don't know, putting into their private pension, whether they've bought anything duty-free, have they taken out an ISA? I mean, there's all sorts of ways. That, have they given away large gifts in order that their estate isn't as much when they die, so they avoid inheritance tax? I mean, we're within an inch away saying every MP's tax return should be put in the public domain, aren't we?
It is remarkable, given that this story was actually published a month before it reached national prominence. Mm-hmm. It was published in Private Eye, and yet no one really sniffed at it until it became the month of the tax rise. And that comparison is what made it a story that was salient in the minds of so many people, and it hit at the time at which Rishi Sunak was under a great deal of pressure from a number of various stories, whether it was his donations to his former school, whether it was indeed the taxes that have gone up, Labour putting out this briefing note to all members of the parliamentary press lobby saying that he's risen taxes 15 times as Chancellor, some more clear tax rises than others, some more dubious in that list, but it's clear he has been net a tax-raising Chancellor so far. Clearly, that hit him at a time at which he was more vulnerable. However, I think that he's responded to it in a peculiar way. In that in the first 24, 48 hours of this story, he was saying quite properly that, his wife was paying international tax on international income and paying British tax on British income. Yeah. And yet, 2 days later, suddenly a U-turn saying he's abolishing, they're renouncing this statement that British tax will be paid on all international income. In effect, some double tax will be paid, international and British tax. And that really undermines the statement in the first place. Why keep this mechanism for people, which has been a net benefit, most people argue, for the country as a whole, to have people who are globe-trotting sort of people being able to base themselves here, to pay tax here as well as overseas? Why then renounce that? Yeah. It sort of undermines the argument in a way. It's almost the worst of both worlds that we've arrived at.
And John, going back to your point again on this, where do we draw the line? I appreciate that the sums of money here are, eye-watering for an average voter, and so it's a bit. There's more money at stake than buying a bottle of gin duty-free, but the same principle at stake. And where I would be, I think I would be more inclined to cry hypocrisy, was if Sunak was saying something along the lines of, an enormous manifesto commitment for us is to abolish non-dom status, which we consider to be a great injustice in the tax system and an unfair way of treating the highly affluent whilst benefiting from it. Or if a politician said, you know, I'm wholly against ISAs, I believe these to be an outrageous middle-class tax break, appalling, it should be eradicated from the code whilst still taking advantage of them. But on non-dom status, there's been no suggestion that the government's policy or Rishi Sunak's is it should be scrapped. So whilst it's there on the statute books, as Tom says, a good number of people would agree it's a sensible thing for an international economy to have. Why back down?
Yeah, well, I mean, hypocrisy is one of those political charges that means whatever you want it to mean at a given moment. It doesn't actually, like you say, it doesn't really fit the dictionary definition. I think it is worth saying, just picking up on what Tom was saying there, that there's not much sense, in my view, in abolishing non-dom status, and it's quite telling that even Labour, even now, Labour are not saying they would abolish it. I think Yvette Cooper went on the shows on Sunday and was saying, oh, we're going to have a look at, which is politician for we're not going to do anything. I think it was Corbyn's policy to abolish it, which almost certainly means it was a bad policy. But of all people, I think I'm right in saying it was Ed Balls back in the day when he was Shadow Chancellor, he said we shouldn't get rid of this because it will mean less money coming into the country. And it is, I think it is sensible in a globalised economy to have some kind of provision for people who have assets or business interests in other countries. Also worth saying we have a double taxation treaty with India anyway, so that element of it was always a bit of a red herring. I think the appeal to her being a citizen of India as well in the initial statement was a mistake because it has nothing to do with it, really. It's citizenship and domicile are not the same thing.
Well, if you enjoyed that conversation, why not watch one of these other videos? And while you're here, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on a single IEA broadcast.